So welcome everybody. As Jaden said, first and foremost, please do ask questions as we work our way through the session. Try to make it as interactive as possible, so there will be plenty of questions for you to actually answer and participate in the session. As you can see, a quick run through there of what we are going to be looking at. So we're going to remind ourselves what the syllabus says for this risk of fraud section, looking at what is fraud and a few examples of fraud. We'll then move on to how we go about assessing the risk of fraud. We'll look at the risk matrix and how everything comes together in our risk matrix once we've made those assessments. We'll round off just reminding ourselves of ethics and sustainability considerations. They are incredibly important. And then just looking at a couple of the exam questions from the AAT online assessments in the Lifelong Portal, which of course you've all got access to. So as I say, just starting off as a reminder what the syllabus actually says. So the very introduction, the first two opening sentences from the syllabus for this module: all organisations must guard against fraud through good control systems. However, many businesses underestimate both the probability and impact of employee fraud. Okay, so that's what we are looking at. As a reminder, everybody has got access to the syllabus in the Lifelong Learning Portal. So if you haven't found it yet, I would strongly recommend that you do have a read through the syllabus. In terms of risk of fraud, by the way, risk of fraud is within the internal accounting systems and controls module. Hopefully, if you're on this session, then you are already aware of that. As I say, risk of fraud falls under Learning Outcome 3, evaluate an organisation's accounting system and underpinning procedures. Within Outcome 3, it is 3.2, risk of fraud, that we're going to have a look at in more detail. So the first part, we need to understand the risk assessment process. So that's identifying the risk, evaluating the risk, responding to the risk by managing or mitigating that risk by taking appropriate action, ensure compliance, both legal and regulatory, and then monitor, review, and report. We then need to be able to assess the impact of poor internal controls on an organisation's exposure to risk. We then need to be able to assess the risk using the following measures. So our risk matrix, grading those risks either low, medium or high, or grading them on a numerical scale where the number increases as the risk becomes more serious. And this is the section that we're going to be looking at today. We also need to be able to recommend a response to risk, ensuring compliance with regulatory and legal requirements. We need to be able to propose monitoring, review and report actions in response to an identified risk. So those are more likely than not also going to be part of your written elements to this type of question. Okay, and we'll have a look at that towards the end when we're looking at the exam questions. As an aside, as well as knowing the syllabus, if you can keep on top of current affairs as well, you'll find lots of different examples of fraud in your newspaper, both local and national, or other online news media, wherever you get your news information from. And then always just keeping in the back of your mind that we're looking at fraud in relation to our accounting systems. Okay, so first and foremost, can you remember what the different accounting systems are? Pop some thoughts in the chat box for me, please. We've got 7 in total from the accounting systems, just 1 or 2 or 3, whatever you can remember. And then I'll bring up the full list shortly. Okay, you need to be able to identify and assess any potential risks of fraud within any of these systems. It's also quite tempting for any systems that we are familiar with to perhaps not look at those systems quite so closely. What I would say is you've got the controls in place in real life, which, depending on the shape and size of the organization that you work for, won't always include everything that the syllabus states. Okay, so reiterating again the importance of knowing the syllabus content as well. Okay, so I will just pause and wait for some suggestions to come through the chat box.
So nothing so far, but I don't think we want to pause for too long. Of course, we can come back. We can come back and, answer these questions if people do leave anything. I do encourage anyone to, again, leave their thoughts in relation to what has been asked in the in the chat box, as she said. But yeah, again, nothing.
Okay,
nothing just yet. But again, we're happy to come back to it.
Yeah, that's fine. So I'll just bring the list up then. That's okay. So we've got purchasing, sales, expenses, payroll, inventory, non-current assets, bank and cash. So maybe it was the way I worded the question, possibly. Hopefully now you've seen the list, you'll be going, oh yeah, those systems. Okay, so as I say, most of you probably familiar with purchasing and sales. Expenses could be incorporated into purchasing. But as I say, any of these 7 different accounting systems could come up in the exam as a scenario where there will be weaknesses, and you will need to identify those weaknesses. And as I say, potentially any risks of fraud as well. Okay, so those are the different systems we need to be aware of. So for this session then, as I mentioned, we're going to be looking specifically at assessing the risk and the use of the risk matrix. Okay, you'd have seen from the syllabus too much content to put into our lunchtime session, but the risk matrix is almost certainly going to come up in the assessment. Okay, so we're going to start by looking at the different steps involved in putting together a risk matrix, and then finish with some exam style questions. The key thing to remember is that each risk is assessed separately. Risk of fraud is new to this new module at level 4, so under this new Quals 22. The risk matrix was initially introduced in the new level 3 unit, business awareness. So for those of you that have come over from the old level 3 AQ16 onto the new AQ22 at level 4, this will be completely new to you. Where are we? July, we went live last July. So there might be some of you that have done the new level 3 business awareness. Okay, but it is completely new. As I say, almost certainly going to come up in the assessment. So many different examples of fraud that might take place within the workplace. You'd have had examples in various textbooks. Does anything come to mind? Can you think of any examples, big and small? You might have even known something, heard rumours, gossip, that someone in your own workplace has been disciplined maybe for a particular type of fraudulent activity. If we've got any suggestions, examples coming through the chat box, and then I can bring some examples up on the screen shortly.
Okay, so we've got one come through. So Sarah Mills has said expense claims.
Yeah, expense claims in terms of claiming for expenses that you didn't actually spend money on, I'm guessing. Absolutely. A way of controlling that, I would expect nowadays if an employee is putting in an expense claim, they should have a receipt to back that up. So yeah, that would be a workaround, or not a workaround, a control that we can put in place to minimize that risk. Yeah,
Apologies.
definitely.
Yep. So we do have a couple more coming through. Kat Jackson has said falsifying invoices.
Yes, absolutely. And I know a real life example where that has actually happened, where someone internal was in collusion with someone external, where I worked previously. It's not really a secret now because it ended up in the local paper, and yes, he got into a lot of trouble. But so yes, good example.
Another one from Chris Bull, who has said intentionally categorizing OPEX costs as CAPEX. Oh, sorry, I'm not sure if I'm reading that correctly, to manipulate financial statements. So OPEX is an OPEX.
Operating expenses instead of non-current asset expenses. Yeah, putting them in the wrong category. Yeah, so it distorts the financial statements. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Sorry, just a couple more. Sarah Mills again has mentioned bank fraud through payments.
Yes. Yeah. So again, similar to falsifying the invoices, falsifying payments, maybe giving the wrong bank details. Yeah. So the payment ends up in the wrong place, the wrong destination. Okay, that's fine. That's okay. Well, I'll bring up some of the examples that I had, all valid examples coming through the chat box as well. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Some of these we've already mentioned as well. I did just put on the bottom there, you can see this has been in the news, the COVID-19 job retention scheme. So claiming for any specific grant and then using it for a different purpose is fraud. Okay, COVID-19, the furlough scheme being one that we're probably all familiar with. Okay, employers were applying for that money and other government schemes, and then they were using it for different things, purposes that it wasn't actually there for. £3.5 billion lost due to fraud and error through that government scheme. So whilst our AAT qualification in this module predominantly looks at sort of sole traders, small businesses, there will be some of you out there working for larger employers as well. Okay, so it's having that wide range of knowledge there. Okay, so some generic theories there. So we're now going to have a little look at a scenario and have a look at assessing various risks. So we need to be thinking about how do we assess these risks and stop them from happening? Or if it did happen, what would the consequences be? So I've just put together an example of a local charity. They're hosting a garden party and they're going to be taking a range of cash and card payments. So we've got 4 mini scenarios there. There'll be a range of independent stall holders selling goods, and they're going to give a percentage of what they sell, the money they sell, directly to the charity. The charity is going to be running their own raffle stall. The charity will be running their own refreshment stand. We're going to have volunteers minding the raffle stall and the refreshment stand. So, thinking about those 4 different scenarios, what might some of the key risks be? As I say, think about those 4 different elements, the different risks of fraud that might occur. I'm saying might. We like to think with a charity, no one's going to do anything mean and horrible, but we know in real life, in reality, these things do happen, sadly. So we need to be mindful of that.
Okay, so just going to wait a little bit to see if anyone has any thoughts in relation to this.
I know there's quite a lot of typing involved with some of my questions. I should have made them a bit shorter.
So I'd say, do you want to recap to say what the most important part is? I'm not sure if they might be maybe a little bit overwhelmed by the text. Like, is there a key part of the question
so if
answer?
I can bring up, so I'll bring up some of the risks and then we'll be looking at assessing them. So our first instance, independent stall holders, they could sell some items without actually taking a record of the transaction, maybe not issuing a receipt. So therefore that money is going to go to the stall holder instead of what had been promised to the charity. We could have volunteers offering drinks for free because it's a hot day. So again, they're not going to be taking as much money for the charity. So the charity are losing out there. Similarly, volunteers giving away raffle tickets to their friends who've arrived early. So raffles can quite often generate a lot of income for that charity. We all know if we go along to something like this ourselves, we see 2 or 3 really nice looking prizes on the table, it's going to tempt us to buy that raffle ticket. So if we're just giving away those tickets, then obviously that's less income.
Hi Emma, sorry, just really quick, we did get someone come through. Sarah did mention, she commented, cash payments need to be receipted in and verified by the third party.
Yes, absolutely. So linked to that first bullet point there, and also those second 2, or the last bullet point as well. So yeah, we need proper what's the word I'm looking for? Supervised, double-checked reconciliations. Yeah, exactly as the comment there. And then cash potentially being stolen as well. So we need to be careful with that. So these are just some of the risks involved, but the risks specific to the previous list that we were just looking at. Anyone got any questions at this stage, or any more comments come through?
Yeah, we'll just pause for a moment to see if anyone has any additional thoughts about the key risks. If not, we can proceed, but we will just pause for a moment and wait and see. If not, then I'll give you the green light. But yeah, I'd say just another 20 seconds or so. If not, then we can proceed.
It's quite a bit of information to take in, isn't it? Especially with the delay as well.
Oh, it's so good. Yeah, I think they might just be, ingesting it all, which is fine. Again, that's what these sessions are for.
Yeah.
But yeah, nothing so far. But again, if something does come through, I will relay that to you. But yes, we can proceed.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. Okay, so we've looked at some of the key risks. Okay, and we've got the first three there on the screen. What we need to start thinking about now are which employees are potentially, and that's only potentially, involved here, and might there be any collusion? Okay, so thinking about these first three risks or possible risks, which employees, if any, might be involved. So we need to be thinking about who would potentially be organising the garden party, other members of staff at the charity, and so on. Made a little bit harder perhaps if this is a scenario that we just don't have any first-hand experience with. I'm incredibly fortunate because I looked at the scenarios. This is loosely based on some of the e-learning resources in the learning portal, adapted, as I say, for a local charity running a garden party, which when I was invited to run this session, it was exactly what I was helping out with locally as a volunteer for a charity that I'm involved with. And I thought, oh, this is perfect. Okay, so this is particular scenario, as I say, has come quite easily, but if it's not something that you are familiar with, no reason why you would be necessarily, it can make things a little bit harder. But this is where it pays to read around that wider knowledge and get more real life examples of things where possible.
Yes, sorry, Emma,
good.
just really quickly. Got another comment from Sarah saying DBS checks for staff would help greatly.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, certainly. And then, yes, when you go to work for a charity, you have the DBS checks. Volunteers as well quite often have to go through DBS checks as well. So, yeah, definitely that would certainly be a generic requirement. Not so much for the independent stall holders, but certainly for the volunteers. Yeah. Shall I bring up some of the answers? Or have we got any more comments?
So I'd say let's give it another 10 or 15 seconds. If not, then we can proceed. But yeah, let's just pause for a brief moment. Nothing so far, but again, don't want to pause too long, so that's fine. Again, if anything comes through, I will relay that to you.
Yeah, okay. So our first risk then with the independent stall holders, unlikely to have any employees here, but you could possibly have the party organizer, the event organizer might be in collusion. They wanted to take some more money from themselves rather than giving it to the charity. Volunteers offering drinks for free as it's a hot day. Could have the garden party organizer sort of turning a blind eye to that sort of thing, or perhaps they've not explained things quickly, but unlikely to have any collusion. Similarly, giving away the raffle tickets. Again, that would be down to your garden party organizer, potentially not providing that training. Unlikely to collude with the volunteers, possibly. There's not going to be much in it there for them. If you've got these, in fact, let's bring up the next. Now you've got a bit of an idea of what we're looking for. There's our last couple of risks, potential risks. So have a little think about which employees might be involved with these two scenarios. And I'll just carry on talking for a little bit, because what I was going to say was, if you've got these kind of scenarios presented to you as written questions in the exam, rather than multiple choice, then you need to be getting those explanations down on the page. Why have you given that particular employee? If there is any collusion, as I say, who are they colluding with, and why? Okay, so you might, it's all about getting the examiner to understand what you are talking about and trying to explain.
Okay, so yeah, again, just going to pause for a brief moment to see. We didn't have anything for the last one, but we'll pause again very briefly to see if you have any thoughts. If not, then of course we will be happy to proceed. But I will give it another 10 to 15 seconds, and then we will go on from there. Nope, nothing so far. So yeah, again, Emma, I'm happy for you to proceed, and I'll let you know.
Okay, thank you. So if we're looking at cash being stolen from one of the stalls, then any or all employees that are there helping out, they might even be in collusion with a volunteer, potentially. And then stealing money whilst cashing up at the end of the day. You've got your cashier who's ultimately responsible for doing that, possibly a line manager. They might be in collusion with one another. Okay, so as I say, that's the first element that we need to be looking at when we're assessing our risk of fraud. Which of our employees are potentially involved? The next step that we need to look at is assessing the likelihood of the risk occurring. What do we mean by likelihood? So literally, how likely is it that the risk will occur? The likelihood of risk is then divided into 3 levels. So I am just going to pause here to see if anyone can remember what our 3 levels of risk are. This is a bit easier in terms of typing the answers into the chat box. So hopefully we can remember our 3 levels of risk, of the likelihood of the risk occurring.
All right, perfect. So yeah, have any thoughts in relation to that? The likelihood of risk is divided into 3 levels. If you know what they are, or if you know any of them, you don't have to know all 3.
No, absolutely. One will do. I'll take one of 3.
All right, so we have one in from Kat. She was saying, or they were saying, low, moderate, and high.
Yes, I will take that. Well done, thank you.
We'll
yeah, high, medium, low, high, moderate, low, same difference. So if we're looking at high, then the likelihood of fraud is at a very high level. So taking home stationery, well, not now we're all working from home, but when we're back in the office, potentially the likelihood of fraud is possible at our medium level. So theft of cash, collusion, perhaps with external suppliers, for example, as we've previously mentioned. And then we've got low, so the likelihood of fraud is remote. So removing, stealing assets from the company, such as IT equipment. Excellent, well done. We also need to be aware that our likelihood can be graded on a scale. so 1 to 5, where the higher the number, the greater the risk. Okay, and I've put that in there because, as you can see, the syllabus mentions both versions of grading a risk matrix. So you need to be sure that you are comfortable with both versions. Okay, so in other words, the high, medium, low, or our numerical grading there. Okay, so that is how we assess the likelihood of these risks occurring. The other risk element that we need to assess is the impact. Okay, so if we are looking at, so the impact of an organisation, if the risk occurs, we need to be thinking about non-financial as well as financial. Okay, so I'm just speeding up a little bit because I'm conscious of time and I've still got quite a bit to get through. So we've got various types of non-financial risk that might impact an organisation. Okay, we'll come back to our scenario shortly, but we've got reputational risk. Okay, so we've seen in the news, in real life, lots of different examples of the knock-on effect of fraudulent activity or otherwise negative press having an effect on the reputation of an organisation. We've got the operational risk, so making sure that we've got the right people in the right job roles. And event risk, so bad weather affecting an outdoor sporting event or concert. Okay, and we are all familiar with that in this country with bad weather events. Okay, and so our impact of risk is graded on a similar basis to the likelihood of risk. So in other words, high, medium and low again. So high, the effects of the fraud are going to be very serious for the organisation, could affect profit levels and or liquidity, could potentially lead to the organisation actually going bust, falling into administration. We've got the medium impact, so the effects of the fraud are significant but can probably be dealt with internally, or maybe in some cases calling the police. And again, the impact of the fraud is insignificant when it's categorised as low. So taking that stationery home isn't going to have a huge impact on the organisation as a whole. And so as a reminder, impact will also be graded on a scale of 1 to 5 if you're looking at the numerical matrix. Okay, so the higher the number, the greater the risk. Okay, so that's our likelihood and impact. So if we now come back to our scenario, you can see on the screen there, we're going to have a little look at the likelihood and impact of each of our identified risks occurring. We're looking at these from a financial perspective. Okay. I've got each risk on the slides. We might have to skip through some of them. As I say, I'm just a little bit conscious of time, but thinking about our first risk that we looked at, which is a reminder, independent stall holders sell some items without taking a record or issuing a receipt, meaning that less money goes to the charity. We decided that probably wouldn't be much risk from an employee perspective, might have a party organizer, the event organizer if they're in collusion. What do we think is the likelihood of this risk happening? What is the impact? So high, medium or low, you can just pop one of those 3 answers suggestions into the chat box.
All right, yep. So we will again take a very brief pause just to see if anyone has any thoughts. So as Emma said, low, medium, or high. If you have any thoughts as to what this might be, let us know. And then we can take it from there. Oh, Sarah has come through and she has said medium.
Yeah, I would agree with medium for the likelihood. So that's good, because these can potentially feel a little bit subjective, but when we come back to the theory and the specifics of the theory, AAT will have a right or wrong answer for these questions in the exam. So yeah, likelihood is possible, so medium.
And then do we want a separate answer for impact?
The impact, yep. So you would always be grading these separately, yep.
Okay. All right, so we've got one for likelihood. Let us know if you have any other thoughts, or if you have any thoughts about what the impact might be, low, medium, or high. Again, we'll pause very briefly, but not for too long. So I'll give it another 10 seconds or so, and then we can proceed. Okay, so Sarah has written 4. I'm not sure.
Right, and number 4. So what you wouldn't do with the risk with your fraud matrix is mix and match your high, low, medium between a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I see.
Okay, so we're looking
sorry,
at
just very sorry. We just did get one in. Hadi said low.
Low, yes, spot on. I would have said that was low as well. Nothing's actually been stolen from the charity, so the impact of this as a risk is quite low, but then the charity aren't going to receive as much as they might have anticipated. Okay, so as I say, I've got each risk up here, but I'm just going to talk through the next few. As I say, I don't want to run out of time to do the exam questions at the end, but when you're watching this back on the recording, you can always potentially, I'm guessing, perhaps pause the recording and have a think through the answers here. So our second risk was looking at volunteers offering drinks for free as it's a hot day. So in terms of our likelihood and impact, we could say this was a high likelihood. You know, volunteers may well be inclined to give extra drinks away for free. We know what the heat's been like over the last few months. Not today, it's wet and windy. But you could also argue here, which you can see what I've included, although we're looking at the financial risks from a non-financial perspective, you could argue that would this be expected from a charity, maybe offering a few extra drinks for free just because it's a hot day? You could certainly give away the water for free. So that's where perhaps in real life, or you'd perhaps have a different type of matrix asking the questions from the non-financial perspective. And then the impact, fairly low. It's only going to be a small loss to the charity. They wouldn't have been making lots of money probably on their drinks stand. Our third risk was looking at volunteers giving away raffle tickets to their friends who have arrived early. So similar in principle to our previous risk, they're giving away stuff for free. Okay, possibly our garden party organizer could be involved in this. In terms of the likelihood of it happening, probably medium. Volunteers might give away a few raffle tickets early in the hope that no one notices. You always have a few people arriving early to these garden parties before it gets crowded, possibly. Okay, so they might give a few tickets away. This impact, I would suggest, is medium. This could be a more significant impact. As we mentioned earlier, a raffle can quite often generate quite significant income, especially from a small charity, and especially if they've got some really nice looking prizes on the table. Okay, so you don't really want to be giving anything away for free. Our fourth risk was looking at cash being stolen from one of the stalls. Any or all employees potentially could be involved, although you'd hope not. The likelihood, medium, okay, theft of cash could always be possible, especially during these current economic times. So this is again when we're linking back our scenario to what's going on in real life. The impact, medium, could be significant. Any theft of cash is going to have an impact, but if they're also in collusion with a member of staff, then this could involve internal investigation, disciplinary action, or calling in the police. So I will just let people know we've gone through those previous risks. We'll just leave this one for people to have a think about. What is the likelihood and what is the impact? So our cashier stealing money whilst cashing up at the end of the day. Okay, so we said could certainly be the cashier that he or she is going to be doing the cashing up, line manager possibly signing that off as a reconciliation to confirm it's all there. So yeah, the likelihood and the impact of this particular risk happening.
Okay, so just as before, if anyone has any thoughts, they can let us know in the comments in terms of what the likelihood is and what the impact is in terms of levels. And we'll just pause very briefly to see if anyone has any thoughts on this. If not, then we will proceed. As Emma said, a little conscious of time, but we do want to give you an opportunity to answer. Okay, so Sarah has said medium, and I'm assuming this is for the likelihood, and she didn't specify.
Yeah, so certainly the likelihood is medium. As we said with our previous risk, theft of cash is always possible, although we obviously like to think not. But yes, definitely medium for the likelihood there.
Yeah, Chris said the same thing, medium likelihood, so they both got that there. Does anyone have any thoughts on the impact? Let us know. So again, we'll just pause for a brief moment, see if you have any thoughts. If not, then we will proceed. Okay, nothing so far. So if anything does come through, of course, I will let you know. But yes, we can proceed.
Okay, thank you. So medium again for the impact.
Yes, I literally just came through, Sarah.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, so that's good. Yeah, so this could be significant. Any theft of cash is going to have an impact. If the cashier has done this before without being caught out, it's more likely that he or she will attempt to steal further cash when reconciling the garden party monies. Okay, and so this is something else to think about. If they've tried it once, didn't get caught out, they will keep trying. They will get caught out eventually. So in summary, this is how our risk matrix would then be presented. Okay, so you've probably seen similar presentations across your different textbooks. This is be layout presentation for the AAT as well. So you can see we've got the detail of the risk in the first column, whether any employees or not might potentially be involved, who they might be in collusion with. And then you can see how we've summarised the likelihood and the impact of each of those risks happening. Okay, then we've got one more thing for our risk matrix. Once we have assessed each of our risks, we need to determine what action needs to be taken to reduce the likelihood and impact of each risk occurring. Okay, so in other words, we're looking to reduce a medium to a low, or a high to a medium, or even better, to a low. So I've just got here a couple of the risks, and again, I'm just going to keep talking straight through them. You can pause this on the recording when you're re-watching it through. But just thinking about a couple of the risks, thinking about what actions could be taken to reduce the likelihood and impact of them happening. So volunteers giving away raffle tickets to their friends who have arrived early. So training, in essence, is the key word. Okay, if this was in a scenario situation, you would need to expand on that. What sort of training are they going to need? State the obvious, okay, is what I always say. So arrange a training session with the volunteers explaining the process, such as the cost of the raffle tickets. Okay, are we selling tickets? Are we selling per ticket or per strip, for example? We all know when we've bought raffle tickets, you can either buy individual tickets or you can buy a strip. Someone is interested in a particular prize, explain that they need to purchase a raffle ticket to be in with a chance of winning it. The prizes are not for sale individually. Okay, these are real life examples from when I was manning the raffle stall at the garden party a few weeks ago, as I mentioned. Oh, that looks nice. Can I have that? No, you need to buy a raffle ticket. And then our risk 5, the cashier steals money whilst training up at the end of the day. So thinking about what actions could be taken to reduce the likelihood and impact of that happening. Training, yes, but again, in an exam situation, write down that procedure that you want to be putting in place for cashing up. So, for example, 2 people present when you are cashing up the money, reconciling that cash to the receipts, knowing the value of the initial float before you started so that you can then work out how much you've actually taken and what you should have left over. And then making sure that money is securely locked in the safe overnight before taking it to the bank. If you've been watching through back on the recording, you may have thought of some other suggestions. And then just for information, I've got the numerical version of our risk matrix there with the 1 to 5 gradings. As a reminder, the higher the number, the greater the risk. And then linked to that, our reduced risk matrix there with just the likelihood and the impact. The grid on the right-hand side there in lovely AAT green, so you can guess where I've got that from, our lovely e-learning resources, but just to explain how it works. So what you would do is take the likelihood figure. So if we look at our first risk there, you've got the likelihood of 3 multiplied by the impact of 2, to give you an overall score of where your risk might land, if you like, on the overall matrix. Okay, so green is very low. You've got the amber and the orange as the risk gets higher, and then you don't really want anything in those red boxes. That could end up being a very high risk indeed. As I say, I got this grid from the AAT's e-learning resources, so please do you have a look at those on your learning portal. I then also got, and I don't know if we've got time for these are a really brilliant test for everybody watching to remember their 5 fundamental ethical principles. Have we got time to ask these questions and get the feedback?
Yeah, we've got some time.
Brilliant, thank you. So our first one then, you can see a person should be straightforward and honest in performing professional work and in all business relationships. Which of your 5 fundamental ethical principles is this one?
Okay, just going to pause to see if anyone has any thoughts on this one. Oh, Chris has come back. He has said integrity.
Integrity, yeah, well done, Chris. Integrity. So our next definition: professional accountant has a continuing duty to maintain professional knowledge and skill at the level required to ensure that a client or employer receives competent professional service based on current developments in practice, legislation, and techniques. Hopefully some of you might have been a quicker skim reader than I am reading it out, but it gives time for people to have a think about that one.
Not to worry. So Kat has written competency and due care.
Yes, absolutely. Professional competence and due care. Well done. Our next one then, a professional accountant should not allow bias, conflict of interest, or undue influence of others to override professional or business judgments.
All right, let's see what everyone thinks. It's going to give you a moment. All right, Kat has written, Kat, Chris, and Del have all written objectivity.
Yeah, well done. All objectivity for that one.
Nice.
Sometimes people do get objectivity and integrity mixed up, so well done. We've had all correct answers coming through there. This definition is a bit difficult to give without actually giving it away. A professional accountant should respect the confidentiality of information acquired as a result of professional and business relationships and should not disclose any such information to third parties without proper and specific authority, unless there is a legal or professional right or duty to disclose. So whilst I'm sure everyone has already got that answer, it's remembering those last little bit about having specific authority.
Yeah, so Kat and Tom have written confidentiality.
Yeah, confidentiality.
Yeah.
And so process of elimination, I'm sure everyone can remember the last one. A person should not act in any way that is unprofessional or does not comply with relevant laws and regulations.
All right, let's see if anyone has any thoughts about this one. Kat has written professional behavior.
Yeah, professional behavior. Well done, Kat. Thank you very much. Yeah, so just a quick recap on our professional ethics there. I've also put a recap in here on sustainability, and I'm going to give the reason as to why in just a moment. So we've got our definition there. Sustainability is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So as a reminder, we've got the 3 main principles of sustainability there. So economic growth, environmental protection, and social equality. Do make sure you know the difference between those 3 main principles. And so in an assessment situation then, as well as in real life, you should always be considering the ethical and sustainability implications when putting together an action plan following a risk assessment. And key, even if you are not specifically asked to do so in the question, okay, you always need to be thinking about that. Okay, so I did include some AAT or the relevant questions from the AAT assessments, but I realise it's 1 o'clock, so I know students have got access to all of these as well. So I can skip over these because it's nearly 1 o'clock.
Yeah, I was going to say we are running a bit low on time. However, the slides are available in the chat, so you can go ahead and access those directly. Additionally, these sessions are recorded, so you will be able to go back and rewatch them at your leisure as well. But yes, in terms of the actual question here, the slides are in the chat, so you can access that and you can go through them. Alternatively, they are available via the lifelong learning portal.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. So if I quickly skim over these so we don't see what the answers are. As I say, they are taken directly from the online practice assessments in your learning portal. Okay, so you've got them there as well. So just a quick summary of what we've looked at then, the risk of fraud, how it fits into our syllabus. We looked at assessing the risk step by step, looked at the presentation of our risk matrix, both the low to high method and numerical formats, quickly recapped our fundamental ethical principles and our main principles of sustainability. Skimmed over those exam style questions, but as Jaden said, you've got the slides. They are taken from the actual online assessments as well in your learning portal. They are a must as part of your final exam revision and exam preparation. Okay, so thank you very much from me. Thank you for joining in and answering the questions. Best of luck for your exams whenever you are sitting this particular exam. Don't know if anybody has any further final questions.
I will pause very briefly just to see if anyone does. But whilst we're waiting, I would like to give a huge thanks to everyone that took the time to come and sit with us during this Facebook Live. Special shout out to Sarah, Kat, Chris, and Thelma. Thank you all for taking part. You can find us again on social media on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, TikTok. We're also on Threads. Follow us on there too. And of course, as I mentioned before, these sessions are recorded, so you can go back and you can re-watch at any point. We did get a quick question from Kat saying, do you ever process risk an individual?
Say that again. Process risk.
Do you ever process risk on an individual?
Process risk on an individual. That might be dodgy territory in terms of GDPR and this, that, and the other, because there's only so much information you can hold. But as part of the bigger picture, as I say, you are looking at which employees might be involved in any of these sort of risk areas, as it were. I think it'd be a bit iffy if you were looking at actually assessing individuals themselves.
Okay. All good. All right. Again, thank you all very much. Again, follow us, like and comment, and we will see you guys later on the next one. Again, thanks again, and see you. Bye for now.